gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to our event today. Sorry for being a bit late. And because we're running a bit late on time, one of the speakers actually has to leave at 7 o'clock. I will only quickly introduce them and will give the floor to one of our speakers who prepared a short presentation on the elections. So we have two distinguished speakers here with us. I will start with Hananya Naftali, who flew in from Israel just for this event, so thank you for doing that. He is a leading Israeli influencer, and he's also working with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on his social media team. Another speaker would be Professor Balázs Gábor, who is the Vice Rector of the Jewish Theological Seminary from the University of Jewish Studies here in Budapest. Thank you for being with us. And last but not least, a visiting fellow, Dr. Ophir Hybri, who is, of course, beside being a visiting fellow with us, Vice President of the Herzl Institute in Jerusalem, and also a co-founder of the Edinburgh Foundation in Washington. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I would like to thank the audience for being with us, and I will quickly give the floor to Hananya to make his opening presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So for those of you that don't know me, I am Hananya Naftali. I've been working for the Prime Minister of Israel, the future Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, for the past 5 years. And you know, since our time is short, I do want to really run quickly the presentation. You know, working for the Prime Minister of Israel as a young man can be very challenging. You know, I never dreamed of, first of all, standing and speaking here. I used to be a very, very shy kid, like sitting in the back, running from attention, like from fire. This was not what I anticipated for myself. So from being a shy kid to working for Benjamin Netanyahu and accompanying him in the last 5 election rounds was very, very interesting. Let me start with this funny video. That is me.
אתה יודע מה אתה עושה? אתה מצביע למעשה לממשלת לפיד גז ואפילו מוסלמים. אם אתה בא, הסקרים שלנו מראים שאנחנו הולכים בגדול 61, 62, 63 מנדטים. מה יהיה גוף? איך להצביע? כולם הפעם הולכים להצביע, אף אחד לא שם.
So, in this election, you know, it's very much like Netanyahu. It wasn't planned. I pretty much had my coffee in the other room, the advisor's room, and he came and said, let's film a video to wake the voters because what we focused on, our polls showed that a lot of Likud voters didn't go to vote because they believed that we're going to win, and we lost. So this election, we really focused on waking the public up. These are the final results. The Likud got the majority of the votes, obviously, and you know, I do want to run with the numbers real quick just to give you a perspective. This is, you know, what we call winning in a landslide. Of course, you know, if we compare this to the Hungarian great victory of the Fidesz party, it's not a landslide. It's, you know, a little bit, but for us, the right-wingers, it was a big victory. We were very happy with that because the Israeli public finally went out to vote. The right-wing people, and as you can see here, it shows you very clearly that the majority of the Israeli public, they are right-wing, and they want to see Benjamin Netanyahu leading the current government for strong 4 years. And I want to quickly run to you because how did I get this job? You know, I'm currently 27 years old. I started to work for the Prime Minister when I was 22, and it is very interesting that the Prime Minister surrounds himself with young people. I have my social media platforms. I have approximately 2 million people following me. I make videos about Israel, defending Israel against the lies that are spread on the mainstream media. I fought Hamas in the Gaza Strip. I served in the Israeli army, in the Armored Corps. In 2014, we entered the Gaza Strip during Operation Protective Edge. And I just turned 19, okay? We entered, we fought Hamas, and when we came out, we received our phones. You can't fight with your phones. And I would check the news, and I saw all these protests against Israel, hatred. And I told myself, okay, after this operation, I'm gonna improve my English, improve my editing skills, message delivery, and I'm gonna start and defend Israel because it feels like no one is doing it. Defending conservative values, defending the truth. Long story short, I gained around 200,000 followers, and in Israel, we have this thing we call chutzpah. Did you dare and you achieve what you want to achieve? So I contacted Benjamin Netanyahu's advisor, and I said, listen, I want to do an interview with the Prime Minister. It was back in 2017. And I want to hear from him how to defend Israel in the best possible way. Because he was the ambassador to the UN. In a funny way, they said, it's very awesome because we were actually thinking about doing the same thing with you. So long story short, I did the interview with him. I got 2 minutes to speak to him. And it was late in the night. He was tired. But as soon as I talked about defending Israel, his eyes lit up. So we ended up conversing for approximately 20 minutes. And months later, his team staffers called me and offered me the job. And when you're 22, you don't say no to the Prime Minister of Israel. So I've been working for him since 2018. This is actually the first meeting. I really could suit up, but you're 22, so what do you know? Still too young for a suit. But I have to say that there are a lot of rumors about how the Netanyahus are acting, what it's like to be in their circle. Our time is very limited, but I have to say that we did have a lot of fun moments that you don't hear about on the mainstream media. For instance, in one of our times we had to run to this election event. Thousands of people were waiting, and we were at his house, and we saw his son, Avner, entered the house. And Netanyahu is running, carrying his bag, running to the car. As soon as he saw his son, he stopped and said, Avner, are you not going to hug your father? And it's these family moments that you don't hear about on the mainstream media. The media, it was a privilege for me to get this inside look at how Netanyahu is acting, not just as a leader, but as a father, as a husband. And we had a lot of fun experiences together, like this video that you saw. He was like, Hananya, take my blanket. It's actually his blanket. He sleeps sometimes in the office. Take my blanket. I'm going to wake you up, and we're going to have this fun video. It was one take. But I do want to stress the power of social media. I think that, nowadays, being conservative myself, nowadays, we feel like we don't have the mainstream media as our backbone, as a source of information. And especially the young conservative people are going to social media. So this is... we were live streaming back when he was the Prime Minister. It's in his residence. And we saw the power of social media, that if you have a message, if you have a story, no one can stop this. Of course, nowadays we have the issue of censorship, but we really have this power called social media, where you can tell the truth and encourage people to stand for your opinions and ideas. And I have to say that it's really interesting to see Netanyahu surrounding himself with young people like me and like many other people, meaning that he believes not only in the wisdom of the people with experience, but he believes in the future and wants to give the next generation a chance to have their say And to me, it was remarkable because we had been sitting, deciding on the next things that we're going to do for the election, and you're sitting in front of this very experienced Prime Minister of Israel, former Prime Minister, who reshaped modern day Israel. A lot of people say that he was obviously he's the longest serving Prime Minister, and you're sitting next to this very experienced leader, and he hears what you have to say. Me being 25, 27 now, he wants to listen to what you have to say. He wants to learn. And to me, that was very inspiring to see that he believes in the youth. He believes in what they have to say. He doesn't negate their opinions. And, as we said, conservative voices are silenced in the mainstream media. And I believe that today we saw this great victory that we had in the election. And it only shows how important it is for each one of us to participate in social media. Today it's this town square. Everybody is coming and expressing their opinions. Why should we be silent? Why should we be apologetic for me to hold conservative values, conservative opinions? And I think that it's you really see these two examples. I was telling my friends here how I when preparing this presentation, I wanted to find an article that calls Orban a dictator. And it was very easy to find an article that calls him a dictator. In the same way that it was easy to find an article, just this recent one that says that Israel is not the Israel that we're going to remember. It's all gone, especially with these new parties that are now in the picture, new figures. And, I have to refer quickly to this New York Times article. It said there, it quoted the Torah. It said in the Bible, it says that we were all created in God's image, and basically referring to the fact that now there is not going to be equality between Arabs and Jews. I found it very funny that when the Bible serves the left media, they quote it. They use the Bible. But when it's about pro-life principles and other conservative ideas, the Bible does not exist, and God, who is God? I think that these double standards, people are tired of this. They don't want to hear one-sided story, hypocrisy. And I just have to say that, for me, I was born and raised in Israel. I never lived outside of Israel. And especially looking at Hungary, I have to say that to us Israelis, Hungary is like not just a country that we share common values and interests with, but family. Because to me, being a Jew traveling here in Hungary, in Budapest, I'm not afraid to speak Hebrew. I'm not afraid to be who I am, an Israeli. I'm not afraid to wear my kippah if I want to. And thank you. And I have to say that it's a lot thanks to the current administration that won in Hungary. I know that there are a lot of different opinions regarding this, but to see Prime Minister Viktor Orban stressing that the policy of zero tolerance towards anti-Semitism and taking action, I think that, today I visited the shoes on the Danube Bank. I saw the 60 shoes, different shapes, fancy shoes, simple shoes. And just 5 minutes from there, the biggest synagogue in all of Eastern Europe, standing tall, standing proud. Hungary is one of the safest countries in the world for Jews nowadays. And I have to say that we acknowledge that as Israelis. And on the top of that, I do want to say that, people love to stress the problems in Hungary, in Israel. Show me one country that is perfect. There is no human being that is perfect, no country that is perfect. But what I like about those two leaders, and of course I'm biased, is that they believe that they know what is good, and they don't care about saying the right thing, but doing the right thing for the sake of their nations. And so I do want to say that for us, Hungary is family. we don't see you just as merely as a partner. You know, one of my Hungarian friends here asked me, if I visit Hungary, if I visit Israel and I say that I'm from Hungary, what the reaction is going to be like? And I mentioned to him that, you know, we talked about how we have politicians in Israel with Hungarian background, Jews in Israel. It's one big family. And I do want to thank you for listening, for your friendship with Israel. It's something that we cherish deeply. And yeah, so thank you very much. I hope all the best for Hungary and for Israel as well.
Thank you. I didn't know that Netanyahu had so good sense of humor, so thank you for showing that video where he's waking you up. So I will start with perhaps a pretty obvious question. It might be a bit irrelevant as well, but I'm not an expert on Israeli elections, so and there might be other people in the audience who are not. So I was checking out the election results, and I read that the results are only confirmed tomorrow. So my first question would be, does that mean anything, or it's really only a couple of hundred votes which are still uncounted for, or do you think there could be any changes happening in a day, or that's more like a formality and there's no serious change happening? This question is basically for anybody who would like it. Perhaps I would ask the professor, because we talked a bit in the beginning about this. So thank you.
So there is no meaningful change expected. It's really a formality. So you can consider the election results as final.
Okay. Do others agree, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I would add on the top of that if I'm not wrong, in the second round of election, out of the 5 rounds that we had, Neftali Bennet lost in 1,400 votes. So, in seeing how you know, divided the country was politically, so you know, every party thought that, you know, the last vote is going to determine, but we saw that it was almost in a landslide.
And it was before the elections. It was called by almost all the parties a Gewalt campaign, which means it's a Yiddish word which is like saying that it's an oive campaign. It's something that we are in huge danger, because really every party felt that it will be very, very cutting, and it will be like every vote is counted. It's very important, every vote.
So there's no party, because there were some parties who didn't reach the election threshold. There's no party which could reach that with even a couple of votes. There's nothing like that.
No. And, you know, we have this, I call them far left party, Meretz, that they were really hoping to pass the threshold. But as the professor here mentioned, Yair Lapid went on this Gewalt campaign, and he ended up destroying his own left bloc, because Meretz did not pass the threshold that is required. If I'm not wrong, it's 3.25% of the votes. And so they didn't pass the threshold. And this is why you know, the last vote really matters to voters in Israel, because it's a small country. It's not divided by, you know, districts and electorates like in the United States and other countries. So for us, it is a very, you know, the final votes, it's the last vote is something that a lot of people and a lot of leaders, I would say, really wait to see.
That's understandable. I'm going to play a bit of a devil's advocate, because you said it's a landslide for the right, which I think is true if you look at the parliament seats. But if you look at the actual election results, I think it was pretty close. And of course, some opposition people are now saying that we're talking about the lost votes, the parties who didn't get into the parliament, who were mostly on the left. So do you think this could be a problem for legitimacy for the next government, that you have a high number, I mean, relatively high number of so-called lost votes from left parties? or people just know that the Israeli election system works like that and will still accept these results? I will start with Ophir now and then give you a chance to defend your landslide election.
So, first of all, there is no question of legitimacy, because even according to everything else, the right still has a majority. It's not like 64 mandates, but even if assuming that the left would have got another 25,000 votes, so Meretz and Ballot would have passed, still the right would have had a small majority with 61 mandates. So the size of the victory is a bit skewed because two parties didn't pass. But it's not, as happened sometime in America, that the party with less votes wins. This is not the case in Israel. However, the interesting thing is that this relatively small victory for the right in numbers is not representative of the actual number of supporters for right-wing ideas. Because in Israel, in general, the electorate for the last almost 15 years is very much to the right. I would say it's more or less among the general population about 60% to 40% left to right. And among Jews, it's even, I would say, even 2/3 vote for the right. Only the issue is that some of those who vote for the right have a problem with Netanyahu. So the election in Israel, by the way, also in Hungary and maybe in America, became very polarized around the prime minister. The election was very little about policies. Let's say that, for instance, Netanyahu proposed, liberal policy, and Lapid proposed a socialist. That wasn't the case. The case was very much the opposition said, with Netanyahu, the country will go to hell. It will be terrible, blah, blah, blah. And the right said, no, he was prime minister 12 years, and actually he fell from power in a kind of, trick, political trick. So worst case scenario, it will be as it was. And also their argument was that he learned his lesson. So basically the point is that, one, I don't see any problem of legitimacy. And second is that it's the size of the victory, if anything, is less than the actual support for right-wing policies. So I expect that if Netanyahu's government will follow right-wing policies, it will become even more popular. Of course, we cannot know what will happen, but the basic situation is not that Israeli society is polarized left to right. It's polarized at the moment for Netanyahu against Netanyahu. But if you look at conservative or right-wing values, the support is far wider.
But isn't that a problem again, then? So I understand if people are more conservative, but if they don't like, there's a conservative population who might not say don't like Netanyahu, then that could again be a problem on the long run, no?
Well, in the long run, maybe. But again, theoretically, this parliament and this government can continue for almost 5 years, actually. So it has a solid majority, and it's very uniform right-wing. It's not, some times Netanyahu headed a government with right, but some elements from the left, and he could argue, look, I couldn't actually carry out my policies because I had to. But in this case, it's Netanyahu said, I think during the election, he said, I want a right wing in Israel. They say male male, on full time. All right wing. So this is a absolutely right wing government. So Netanyahu has all the capabilities of carrying out the policies the party that supports him want to carry it out. If he doesn't, like every political leader, he can succeed, he can fail, and the country will be inside. But I don't feel that there is a basic problem of legitimacy. In Hungary too, there was like an opposition to the prime minister that was on the left, but some of them were people on the right? If you can say on the right, anyway, Jobbik wasn't on the left, right? So they united and they lost because they were opposed to the prime minister, but it wasn't the coalition against Arban wasn't united by one policy. It was opposition to a person. And so it's somewhat similar in Israel.
Okay, would anybody like to add something to that?
I would like to say that, there's rather this question of who governs, because Netanyahu won, but then who governs, actually? We have this funny saying in Israel that every Israeli wants to be a manager and not the employee. But I think that, first of all, it's kind of preposterous that the left wing, the left bloc in Israel, their message was vote for me because I'm not Netanyahu. Vote for me because I will not sit with Netanyahu. And, the way I see it is that it's fine to argue policy, it's fine to argue opinions, but why are you against a person? I think that this shows how ridiculous it was, and that they had no real meat to offer to their voters, and perhaps this is why they lost bigly. But I want to finish and say that as for who governs, the right bloc in Israel fully supports Benjamin Netanyahu, because it understands that if we're not united, we cannot govern. And they would rather make concessions than to sit in the opposition.
Professor?
Usually I play the role of the devil's advocate, what you try to do. So let's say they don't like Netanyahu because Netanyahu made this political trick, just to mention the last time when he fell from power, that he simply lied to Benny Gantz. So, people sometimes he has a lot of lawsuits running against him. If they are serious or not, time will decide it. So they are really afraid that he's going to change the general consensus about the democratic values of Israel. So these were the reasons that people said it wasn't that Netanyahu is not a nice guy. Like, it was not about it, but his personal reliability. What would you say about it?
I think that you look at results and you see that in just several months, Netanyahu brought 4 peace agreements with Arab countries, Morocco, Sudan, Bahrain, and the UAE, and there are more countries on the list. So the way I see it, I don't look at the person, I look at the results. If you show me results, I'm going to vote for you. And he had shown results, being the finance minister in Israel. And back in 2003, he saved Israel from the financial crisis. And I'm not asking people to be Bibi fans. All I'm asking is look at results and then decide who do you want to vote for. And the way I see it, I'm not against right or against left. I do want to see all of us united together, because we have enemies wanting to literally destroy Israel. So we don't want to focus on minor issues, but actually unite together, because we have enemies that actually want to destroy us. So I'm a person who looks at results. Thank you.
Staying partly with this question, the Israeli election system is famously, how should I say, fragmented. If you look at the political science literature, it's basically around Belgium. So usually governments stay in power until 2 or 3 years. So it's really rare that a government can stay until the 4 years of its term. And of course, the past 4 or 5 years have been, in this sense, very chaotic, with several elections happening in Israel. So how do you see, will this government fare better than the governments in the previous years? Is it going to be, because it's still a coalition government, of course they have a bigger majority in the parliament, but will it be able to survive years in the future? How do you see how stable is the government coalition, and what are the chances? Let's start with you.
Yeah, of course I hope that the government will survive, because I think that people need to understand that if we are not united, we will not be able to govern. And if every Israeli wants to be a manager and not a doer, then we will not be able to govern, and we will sit in the opposition. So I think that time will tell. I don't know what's going on in people's hearts, but I do have my hopes that this government will stay and that we will be able to do good things for the sake of Israel.
Professor?
Okay, I
Playing
just wanted
devil's
to.
advocate.
Yeah, and it's very funny because usually I have to play the role of the right winger, and no one, not even my children, know my political views. So you are invited not to believe anything that I say, but I will continue my role. So first of all, if you look at the popular vote, then there is no 64 mandates. It's not a majority. Approximately half of the voters wanted Netanyahu and half of the voters, they didn't want Netanyahu. The second, I think Netanyahu is going to be in a very hard position because he personally is absolutely not far right, but he has a very far right party coalition of the national religious party coalitions, which unites, no, it's not just, it's the religious Zionist camp, together like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, which far more right-wingers than Netanyahu. And he also has the two ultra-Orthodox parties, and Netanyahu himself is traditional, but he's absolutely a secular Jew who is proud of his secular values. So it's going to be very hard to navigate between these parties.
Ophir?
Well, this is a kind of a paradox because Netanyahu, it was mentioned that he was a prime minister. He will be now the prime minister who was in power for the longest time in Israel history. But actually, the time in power is very much characterized by in power, Netanyahu is a very prudent and tactical leader. So I think that the greatest changes, the greatest reforms he ever did for Israel were actually when he was Minister of the Treasury back in 2003. As Prime Minister, is actually he was always stopping the more radical aspects of his coalitions. And he actually preferred to always add, until this government that will probably be created soon, Netanyahu always had a party that didn't support him in the elections join his coalition. He preferred, in a sense, to govern from the middle, to have some center-left party and some right-wing radical, and then, to balance within them. Now, actually, he got something that he doesn't like politically, having a full-blown right-wing government where there are radicals and then there are more radicals. But this goes apparently against Netanyahu's nature. And also, look, he's 73, and he will be now prime minister between the age of 73 and if he finishes his period to 78. Now, is this the situation where someone is saying, now I will do the great changes? Maybe yes. I don't know. But again, I say it's a paradox because Netanyahu actually is heading the most right-wing cabinet ever in his own political history, when by his temperament and maybe his age, he would prefer a far more moderate situation. So in a sense, Netanyahu has become the far left of his coalition, and there are even rumors that there were attempts to add one of the more center-left parties to the coalition, but I don't believe that it will happen because they don't have the interest. And by the way, this is not connected, but the three parties on the center-left in Israel are all of them headed by Hungarians. So maybe it's interesting.
Interesting. I didn't know that. But staying on this, I'm just checking my notes, the Religious Zionist Party. So how far right are they really? I mean, as I said, I'm not an expert, sadly, on Israeli politics. So are they far right like Orban or Meloni is considered far right, or are they really far right? So perhaps Ophir can start on that again.
So the point is that the
main policies, basically. So why is it far right?
The right in Israel, the traditional right in Israel, was changed by the last elections because Bennett, who was regarded as more right than Netanyahu, basically was prime minister for a year. Now he's out of politics and his party disappeared. So those who were even more on the right than Bennett, in the past they barely got to the threshold, now are the second largest party after in the coalition. Now, I would say their flagship policies are more settlements in Judea and Samaria. I would say even a more pronounced presence of Jews and Israelis on Temple Mount, and I would say far harder policies towards Israeli Arabs in areas where there has been a kind of breakdown of law and order. So in theory, all three of these policies are also shared by the Likud. But as I said, Netanyahu, within his 10 years, never actually had carried them out. So if Ben-Gvir or Smotrich or these leaders of the religious Zionist party got their way in a way, then you would see a very large effort to, let's say, double the number of settlements in Judea and Samaria. You would have a far more pronounced presence of Israelis on Temple Mount, and so on. But again, I am skeptical. These are their policies, but I'm skeptical that Netanyahu will actually let them carry them out. So.
Yeah, Professor?
It was a very polite and nice introduction of the far right of Israel. Itamar Ben-Gvir, he is openly mourning a mass murderer, a Jewish mass murderer, Baruch Goldstein. He's a big fan of Kahane, who was banned from the Israeli parliament because of his racist views. So I wouldn't say...
Isvan asked me what are the policies, not what are the beliefs.
Yeah, but it will...
So I said these are the policies they are advocating. What someone believes in his heart, I don't know.
You can know because they...
No, actually, he said, look, he says now that he has matured and he made a mistake at that time. So maybe he's telling the truth, maybe not, who knows?
Yeah, so I would feel as a Jew in Hungary, I would feel very, very bad having a member of the Hungarian parliament who had mass murderers and on his wall and adoring him, and now saying that, oh, no, I didn't mean that. So I think there is a real problem with the Israeli far right, and it's just not the policy of Netanyahu.
He's a candidate to be the Minister of Police now.
Yeah, which is very funny because there is a movement in the settlements, fringe movement, but there is a movement which is called the use of the hills, that they attack Israeli soldiers, they attack Israeli police. So there is a problem with them.
Hananya, perhaps as a
to those of you that are not familiar with Ben-Gvir, he's basically the one that keeps the New York Times journalists, the CNN journalists awake at nights in these given times. He had several concerning statements, like people around him were saying death to Arabs, and then when he was running for the election, he said only death to terrorists. So perhaps the views have changed. I personally leaning towards maybe he said these provocative opinions in order to rise to power and then to be able to execute far more moderate policies. But I think that I heard several opinions here whether Netanyahu is the left more side in the government. But I do want to share a quick story with you and say that Netanyahu loves to share this. I don't know if in public or in closed doors, but I think it's a brilliant story that in one of his meetings with Hillary Clinton, they sat in this upper hotel and they had press waiting for them in the lobby. They were meeting there for 3 hours, and Hillary urged him to stop expanding the settlements, which is basically building Jewish homes in Judea and Samaria. This is not an obstacle to peace. And she was urging him to stop because she wanted to sign a deal with the Palestinians, finish the conflict. And Netanyahu stood his ground. And basically Hillary Clinton said, I'm going to give you an hour to think. And if you don't come with the results to me, we're going down to the lobby and we're going to tell the press who is the obstacle to peace with the Palestinians. She referred to him being the obstacle. Netanyahu responded to her and said, you know what? We don't need to wait another hour. Let's go right now to the press and I will exactly tell them what is the obstacle to peace, who stands between peace, us and the Palestinians, and what is your role in all of this. I don't know how it evolved, but maybe she didn't like his answer. But, my take is that since when building homes in our ancestral homeland, where most of the biblical events took place in, is an obstacle to peace? Perhaps, only perhaps, and forgive me for thinking like this, perhaps terror attacks are an obstacle to peace and not building homes.
Thank you. I will stay with you, Hananya, and ask a question about the youth vote. I didn't see any statistics, I'm not sure they are, but hopefully they are, on how the youth voted in Israel. So is it like in most Western countries that the youth is more on the left? Or you have, like you yourself, a lot of conservative young people as well? And also, if there is a problem, then how do you engage with the youth and how you try to send them a conservative message? Because you're involved in social media, I guess that's very important in reaching the youth of today.
So regarding the youth in Israel, Channel 12 actually conducted a poll only among the youth. I'm not sure the ages, but obviously people who are eligible to vote. And the results were magnificent. If the youth were to determine the future of Israel, the Likud would get, if I'm not wrong, 71 or 74% of the votes. So I don't need to add anything to that. But as for engaging with the youth whenever problems occur, I think that the best message to engage with the youth is to add something funny, to liken it to the day-to-day lives. Because politics can be boring and policy can be boring.
The video you showed in your presentation.
See? Wake somebody up to go to vote. Or it can be in many other things surrounding certain policies. So I think that what Netanyahu really excelled in is to understand the power of social media and simplicity. He always says there is beauty in simplicity. Simple, simple, simple.
Thank you. Anybody would like to?
Two things. First of all, it's been for probably a generation that young people in Israel are far more conservative and right-wing than old people. There was a former Israeli minister from the Likud that used to joke that said, every time I hear an ambulance going by, it's either a voter of the left that died or a voter of the right that was born. Because basically the largest share of the vote for the right is among soldiers, and the largest share of the votes for the left is in elderly homes. That is a fact in Israel, and it's not something that changes a lot with age. Meaning, it's not that someone when he's 20 is a socialist and when he's 40 is or the opposite. But this is a general tendency of Israeli demographic in Israel in general, and also is added by the fact that the immigration to Israel is mainly of Jews that choose to come to Israel, and they tend to be also more identified with the right because they are a self-selecting group. So in general, this is the trend. But I wanted to note one segment that wasn't really addressed here and in general in the elections, but which I think is perhaps on the long run the most important, and that is the Arab vote. Because among the Arabs also there are two developments, that the younger generations are becoming more and more Israeli, meaning more, I would say, connected to the Israeli life instead of being in the villages or more tribal and so on. And in a sense, in these elections, I see in the long term the most important victory being that of the Ram party of Abbas. And why is that? Because in general, in the Israeli system for the last 30 or 40 years, in the far back past, there were small Arab parties that were cooperating with the ruling party. And then, about 40 years ago, basically when Begin came to power, the Arab parties became more and more estranged from politics, saying basically we are against the Jewish state, we're against Zionism, and we're not cooperating in any way, not in any coalition with the left or the right. Even they were unwilling even to cooperate with the most far left Zionist party. And the change came a few years ago when the Ram party, which was originally an Islamic party but has becoming more centrist, said we prefer a policy of we accept Israel is a Jewish state, a Jewish majority. All this terrorism and fighting against the national views of the Jews is bringing us not anything. Israel is a reality that will not change. So our role as representatives of the Arabs is to bring more jobs, more state help to this. So Abbas actually started to have talks with the Likud and with the left, and his party was a member of the coalition with the left, and he also doesn't deny the possibility that in the future he might be in a coalition with the right, and some members of the Likud also support that. And and in this election, actually, his party is the Arab party that got the most votes. So the question was before the election: will this choice be prized by the Arab voters? Will they say this choice of cooperating with Israeli parties, becoming a kind of centrist Arab party, will they agree with it, or will they say no, you are wrong, out of the Knesset? And actually, he's the most successful Arab party, and I think that in the long run it means that there will be a process where there will be a large share of the Arab votes that will want to be part of any Israeli coalition, of the right or the left, and being a kind of, like there's a Christian Democrat Party, so a kind of Islamic Democratic Party that wishes to say Israel is a Jewish state, is a Zionist state, but we are working for bettering our own education, health, whatever. So this is my belief that it's very significant in these elections.
Interesting. Professor, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just concerning the youth, that it's one of really the most interesting things that happened in Israel. Like in the 90s when I was living in Israel, it was something unimaginable that the Meretz party and the Labour party will not be able to gather 100,000 votes. Like these were really very strong parties, and many young people voted in the university for them. I was studying in a university which is a religious university and considered very right-wing, but still, even there were a lot of young people who were left-wing voters, and it just seems that they disappeared. Like they don't buy the left ideas. Like it was in the electoral TV shows that many times they asked the left saying that, what would you say to your voters? And they said that we are saying the same things in the last 40 years. And one of the showrunners told them that maybe that's the problem, that 40 years you didn't change anything in what you say. So it's very interesting that the university students and really what happens in the United States, in Europe, that they're very left-leaning, it just disappeared in Israel.
It's amazing. And is there any research on this? So, because my other thought was listening to you, but perhaps it's linked to the military service. Military service is always considered more conservative, or they see some of the terrorist attacks and that makes them more conservative. So is there any research on this, or do you do something at your office perhaps which would show why the youth is more conservative in Israel?
I think that, first of all, in regards to the Arab parties, a lot of them, they created this term, Abu Yair, as referral to Benjamin Netanyahu. And I do have to say that it's, in my opinion, it's insane that we had a member of Knesset, and if I'm not wrong, obviously more than one, from the Arab Party, that praised a terrorist who murdered a Jew. And she's getting a salary from us, the taxpayers. So this is so much for Israeli democracy that I think that there should be legislation that prevents them, bans them from being in our parliament if they're getting salary from us and praising terrorists. But in regards to this left frustration with their leaders, I'll just answer with an example. We just now had a wonderful Minister of Transportation. By wonderful, of course, I'm joking, because she was from the Labour Party, and no hate to the Labour Party, but she, with transportation in Israel, we have problems. There is traffic, there is transportation is not ideal. What did the Minister of Transportation, Merav Michaeli, decided to do? She said, you know what? I really don't like that in Israel, in our language, the stop signs, they're referred to men. Like in our language, there is stop for men and for women. So she said, you know what? I'm a feminist. I just can't stand the signs to only refer to men. Stop, only for men. We're going to change it. And she actually campaigned on saying, we're going to change the signs. There's going to be stop for men, but also for women. And she's always like, whenever she gives a speech, it's so important to her to first of all say, referring to ladies, only the ladies. And she built this, not built, but she just recently, she presented the public with this amazing bus that will prevent sexual harassment in public transportation. And she said she's entering the bus as if she's revealing a new peace plan. And she's saying, this bus is going to prevent sexual harassments. And you know how? Because it has mirrors. She installed mirrors in buses and put these lines so that people will know where to stand. And she's like, this is going to make our lives better. And one of the Israeli influencers made a video in response to her and saying, dear minister, have you been on a bus recently? It's so packed that you won't even see this line. And the mirrors, you think that it's going to stop someone from harassing someone? Of course, it's a very important issue, but obviously, I think that this answers the frustration because there's traffic to solve, improve public transportation. We don't care about the signs. Who cares about that? So,
like what Hananya said, it's so true because
you're not the devil's advocate now.
Yeah, but this time the traffic jams. Everybody agrees that it's one of the most terrible things. So in the election TV shows, they were asking the heads of the parties that when did you stand last time in the traffic jams, and everybody said that when, like 50 minutes ago, when I was coming here. So it's really a huge problem, and it was just very funny that the minister of the transportation had nothing to say about it. So I think it was a very important part why they couldn't win and they lost so many votes. So I think they have lost three mandates in the parliament because it was a complete failure.
I'm glad in Budapest there's no traffic.
It can be a problem as well. I don't know how bad it is in Israel, but
it's very bad. But as to a question about the reason for the shift to the right, it cannot be the army because the service in the army was always in Israel there, and 40 years ago the youth went to the army also. So that cannot be the reason. There was no change in the and actually the point was that even those who left the army were right wing. When they went to university, at university they used to be affected by it. But I think that in Israel the reason is a combination of two aspects. One is the left basically to this day hasn't really recovered from the collapse of the Oslo Accords, because in the 90s the left in Israel staked everything on the possibility of finding some kind of accord with Arafat. And when this collapsed in a wave of terrorism, even though the parties of the left still say, yes, we have to try to find some political solution, they're very unconvincing, even to themselves. Because basically about 20 years ago, the left-wing prime minister, the last fully left-wing prime minister of Israel, that was Ehud Barak, he proposed all kind of deals to Arafat, and he got a no, and then he said, "Any mildaber, there's no one to talk to." So, and this is basically the problem, that the core ideology of the left has collapsed, and they haven't replaced it with anything. There was an attempt by Sharon, who was on the right, but to have this unilateral disengagement from Gaza. But this also is seen as a failure, because after that we have all these missiles. So basically the left, on the main issue of left-right, meaning the settlements and the Palestinians, doesn't have an answer on anything. You cannot find a significant segment of the population that is in favor of making any more
stop signs.
Yeah, exactly. So this is on the one part, and this also means that the agenda of the left has fragmented in a way that, if they can't ride on this, so what is left is a bit of socialism and a bit of green agenda and a bit of gender things, but this one is not unified. And also in Israel, some of the people who are socialists are also voting for Netanyahu, or quasi-socialists, because they support him on the terror issue. And some people who are, in favor of the green agenda are not necessarily represented by the left parties. So in general, I would say there was a kind of breakdown of the leftist ideology, and the youth is finding far more alluring the objective success of Israel as a society within its nationalist and the Jewish national identity is regarded by Israelis as very successful, and so they identify more than any kind of leftist agenda.
Interesting. I think that's true, but what is even more interesting, but I think that's true everywhere else. So I don't think in America a lot of people think and have sleepless nights on transgender bathrooms, or would like their kids to be taught critical race theory, and still it's happening. Perhaps it's, and I will turn to my other question, it's what our Prime Minister said, that small countries like Israel or Hungary don't have the luxury to be stupid, while big countries do have. So, because if the small countries are stupid, they are going to be destroyed by their neighbors or bigger countries.
Yes, but we ask about the youth vote. Is in Hungary, the younger people are more to the left or more to the right? I don't know.
Well, here I think it's more divided, but I think we're doing much better than in the West. So if you look at actual party popularity, Fidesz is the most popular party in the youth, but it's very divided. And if you look at, most Fidesz voters are still older, but party-wise, actually, Fidesz has the biggest vote share. It's around 30%, so it's much less than, let's say, the older age bracelet. But still, because the left is so fragmented, it still could be. But also, the far right was surprisingly popular with the youth in Hungary. So I think if you basically put together the far right and the proper right, we almost have 50% of the youth vote who are, let's say, far right or on the right, which I think is pretty good compared to Western Europe, but still. But
perhaps Israel is setting a trend, because I think that now in many other countries, for instance in Italy, in the last elections, actually the younger people also were more trending to the right. So maybe it's a general a kind of trend that is happening in many countries, and we're seeing maybe the beginning. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure, but I'm seeing that the natural tendency of the younger people to the left, that was a given in the past. In Israel, it's certainly not the case, but it might be that in other places it's becoming more mixed for various reasons.
Interesting. Well, we'll have one last question because the professor will have to leave around 7 o'clock. I'm going to quote here because I think it's interesting. When I was preparing for this discussion, I checked a BBC article about the Israeli election. This was written after the elections, basically, so it's still exit polls. And they quoted, I will not pronounce the person's name correctly, most likely, a certain Gail Talshir from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, who warned that if the exit polls reflect the real results, Israel is on its way to become Orban's Hungary, recently branded as an electoral autocracy by the European Union. You referenced this in partly that Netanyahu and Orban are seen by some of the progressive media as this people who are destroying democracy, but I'm just interested in your thoughts on what are the similarities between Orban and Netanyahu. I think they personally are on good terms and they had a really good working relationship. So how do you see, is Netanyahu really like Orban? I mean, not in this sense, but politically speaking, what are the similarities, what are the differences? And also regarding this, do you think this will help Israeli and Hungarian relationships? I mean, I think even during the previous government in Israel, there wasn't any serious problem between the two countries. I think there's a pretty good relation between Hungary and Israel, but still, it could be, improved, or how do you see that? I would start with the professor because he might have to leave during the.
Okay, so it was very interesting that I read a lot of articles about the Israeli elections, and really many journalists, they mentioned this kind of bromance between Netanyahu and Orban. Both of them are very charismatic leaders. Both of them are very dividing leaders. Either you hate them or you love them. Both of them are going against the mainstream in Europe and in the Western world, and maybe it's not the mainstream anymore, but like what traditionally was the mainstream in Europe. So they are not really bothered by the public opinion in Western countries about them. Which was very interesting for me, that I was watching in Hungary, the election, in the Hungarian elections, this kind of sirtonim, the short films that they make for the before the elections, and I was watching the same in Israel, and I really felt like very similar. I would never compare the situation of Israel to Hungary because Israel is in a danger of existence, but the political atmosphere was very similar. The style of this election short movies, like I could confuse if I'm watching the Israeli or the Hungarian. So there must be something very similar in the leaders and in the political situation of the countries.
Interesting. Well, perhaps Ophir, who's been staying with us for 2 months now.
Well, certainly there are some affinities, but also there are big differences. I would say that, in a sense, as I said, Netanyahu really likes to govern from the middle. So, for instance, Netanyahu did not shape the right in Israel into one large party. Unlike in Hungary, where Orban did create Fidesz as the one, in effect, it's possible that Netanyahu prefers actually a more splintered right because it helps him for various reasons. But the fact is that if he wants to or he doesn't want to, he didn't create the Likud as a party. The right has 50%, 51, 52%. Likud isn't that. Likud is always around 28, 32. I think in the last 10 elections, it was around this area. So basically a quarter of the electorate. Now, for Netanyahu, it doesn't make that much difference because the ultra-Orthodox and the right wing in general are supporting him. But I think that it also creates differences in the possibility of changing things more structurally. So, in a sense, Netanyahu is riding over a social change in Israeli society. And while his actual changes to date, maybe the next government will be different, of course, but his actual changes, for instance, to the judiciary were more or less zero. His actual changes, all these talks about, the media is left wing. He didn't do anything about that, really. He left it as, it wasn't his agenda even, and so on and so forth. So in fact, I might say that they have a lot of similarity in foreign policy and in the general outlook, but although their values are similar in some senses, their actually politics inside the countries, I think, are very different.
Thank you. Lastly, working together with Prime Minister Netanyahu, what is your view?
Yeah, so I have to say, being from the young generation that cares about my future and cares about the future of my children, I think that both Orban and Netanyahu are the perfect leaders for this given time, because I think that, I know Netanyahu personally and some of Orban's staffers, but I think that what really drives them is the belief that they know what is right for their countries and the passion to execute what is good for the country. And I think that Orban and Netanyahu, they really excel in focusing on real issues. Netanyahu on first of all, we have cost of living, but we have Iran, we have all these enemies that are not really happy with us existing. And I believe that, Orban is also focusing on big issues that perhaps the left-wing parties do not offer any solution to. He operates fiercely. That's how we perceive him as Israelis, that he does not care what the mainstream media will say about him. He will protect the borders. And yes, maybe it will upset the media. He doesn't care because he thinks that this is what's good for the people, the nation, and the country. And I think that we really saw this with the immigrant crisis and with him preserving culture. Wherever I walk here, I see buildings being renovated, and I think that this is really amazing. You don't need to, you can be modern and love your culture. You can be modern and love your traditions, and I think that this is amazing.
Thank you. The professor is more than welcome to leave, and he has to go. But I would open the floor now for some questions, if there are. Is there any questions? I can see several, one of them. Not sure if we have a colleague who can help with the microphones. Thank you.
And I just really have to excuse myself. I just telling you as a fun fact that I'm going to give a lecture to the Israeli ambassador, who is opening an exhibition remembering Rabin, the great advocate of the last left leader that was really important in Israel. So I have to speak there about the Rabin remembrance in Israeli collective memory, and I can promise you that I will be the devil advocate in that lecture as well.
Thank you. So I think there was a gentleman there. I think Melissa had a question, and then the third gentleman there as well.
Thank you very much. Hananya, as you were actively involved in the campaign, I'm really curious to learn what was the level of foreign intervention in terms of funding that you have experienced in the campaign. That's part one. As per the professor, he actually said that the Ben Gvir phenomena is actually something extreme right. But actually, as an Israeli, I can say that Ben Gvir is a phenomenon because every action has counter-reaction. Over the course of the last 1.5 years, Israel has experienced an extreme devaluation. We've seen that people are speaking openly across Israel about dismantling the Jewish state. It became, up until the recent election, it was a taboo. all of a sudden it became legitimized. What are your opinions on that?
Well, I'll begin with the first question regarding foreign funding of campaigns. So the law in Israel actually prohibits these kind of funding, to my knowledge. So, it's very different than the United States, where you can get donations, not from foreign, but you can raise donations for your campaign. But in Israel, the state funds you. Each member of Knesset, elected member of Knesset, gets around 1.3 million shekels, which is roughly, I think, 60 million forints. And so each member of Knesset brings the aid, the funding to the campaign, and you use this money in addition to funds that the party has. As to Ben Gvir, I think that you were very right to say that, to every action there is a reaction, and maybe that's why he became such a trending name in Israel. But I think that, people are always very quick to judge before he even did execute any policy. So I think that we need to live to see what's going to happen and carefully examine this.
Okay, so first of all, about foreign money involvement, clearly there was a lot of money going not directly to parties, but there are non-governmental organizations, and it was clear that a lot of impact on these elections would be the percentage of voting among Arabs, and indeed the fact that usually the Arabs vote less than the Jews, and in the last elections even less, and there was an expectation of being far less. So there was a lot of money that came from various outside sources, not to parties, but to organizations that were supposed to raise the percentage of Arab voters. Among these organizations was something that probably no one heard of. It's called the Open Society Fund by a Hungarian, I think, funds it. But anyway, so there was money for that, and the percentage of the Arab votes did go up, but not enough. So there was, but it wasn't that. I would say it wasn't that effective. All things considered, but it exists. As for the second question, the point is that the Ben Gvir phenomenon is, to some effect, let's say, it's influenced by the fact that there was a center-left government in the last year and a half. But it's really the tip of the iceberg of something that is going on for the last 20 years, because the support for Ben Gvir came, first of all, not out of settlers or the settlements or the issues of the settler or even the missiles from Gaza or Hezbollah, but basically because there has been a very slow erosion of state authority inside Israel in Arab areas. Basically, there was a point. This happens also in some areas in France and the US, where there are neighborhoods that are very uniform of, let's say, a certain kind of population. And so the police says, you know what, I won't go even there if I just stop them from going out. And if they kill each other or whatever, it's their business. And unfortunately, this is not something that happens in one day. But in Israel, especially in the Negev area and in some Arab cities, and also in cities that are mixed, let's say, in every city there are a bit of Arabs, but where Arabs are like 1/3 or 40%, like Lod, Lydia, and Ramle. So there has been a slow erosion for many Jews of their feeling of day-to-day security. And it doesn't happen in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. But basically, in the last, let's say, a year and a half, a lot of Israelis have come to feel that the control of the state over these areas is slipping. So Ben Gvir was, in a sense, the voice for large segments of the population that when they are asked, why did you vote for him? They would say, I didn't vote for his religious agenda, and I didn't vote for his foreign relations agenda, but for his promise of law and order. So I think that aspect is central both in the victory of Netanyahu and both in the rise of Ben Gvir, and it has to be seen what will happen with that.
Thank you. I think Melissa had a question.
Is it possible that the movement of the youth vote to Netanyahu is paralleled by that youth vote, which the Trafalgar Group is anticipating the Republicans to receive, that it's propelled by lockdown and subsequent economic downturn, and the powers, the party in power is just inheriting that black eye?
I don't think there's any connection at all in Israel, because again, this is a trend that is going on for a long time. In general, the Israeli population is becoming, it's a general trend going on for decades. The whole population is becoming more traditionalist, more observant, not necessarily more religious. It's not that the actual numbers of people who are strictly religious is significantly larger, but in general, the population is more traditionalist, and this tends to also be reflected in among the youth. So let's say the tendency in the West of so many young people to defer marriage and to not have kids, or to have one kid, or to look for themselves, maybe I have another gender, maybe I have another identity, I don't know. This is almost non-existent in Israel. I'm not saying zero, but it's really, the society is so family-oriented that it's simply the core values of conservatism on the right are always there. And as I noticed, even in the last 2 or 3 elections where Netanyahu didn't actually win because there was opposition to him personally, the other right-wing parties received votes, even though they didn't support Netanyahu, because they reflect the fact that Israeli society, as I said to begin with, is very right-wing, is very family-oriented, is very traditionalist, and in general, even on the left, the mainstream hardcore left is disappearing. And what is the main left-wing party today, Lapid's party, is not a traditionally left party. It's not socialist. They're like kind of center-left, pro-army. Let's say in Europe, they would be regarded as nationalists. So the whole of the political structure in Israel is far more to the right. And as for the lockdown effects and the economy, in Israel, they were very minor, very minor. I mean, our Israeli economy was one of those who suffered the least from the corona, and now is the one who is, the GDP is growing the most afterwards. So really, it was no main issue. It wasn't an issue in the elections, really.
Thank you. There was a question from the gentleman there with the tie. And also there's going to be another question from the gentleman with the
I'd just like to turn to foreign policy. Were there major differences between Netanyahu's bloc and the opposition? And now that he has won, his bloc has won, do you expect any, I don't know, a different or a major shift vis-a-vis the major threats for Israel, which I presume are Iran and the Hezbollah and Hamas?
So I do want to say that Netanyahu has really dedicated so much of his life to make sure that Israel is safe, and I do want to say that there are many actions that were taken, not for publication, but as also in terms of cybersecurity. Israel suffers from cyber attacks more than any other country in the world, and basically, I do want to say that with this administration, Netanyahu feels like this is time to execute, and the more the better. But it is also time that we really need our allies, because being Israel, as we are, we face pressure from the international community. And while we are extremely grateful for Hungary opening a trade center in Jerusalem, it's something that I think Israelis would tremendously appreciate if Hungary would move its embassy to Jerusalem. I think that, being in touch with and having met with several Arab figures in the Arab world, it's not something that concerns them. So I think that Hungary has nothing to be afraid of what would happen to its embassies elsewhere. I think that this is something that Israel would really, really appreciate in addition to the fight against Hezbollah and other terror organizations, because it is time where I think conservative leaders need to unite and for the better of their nations. So I think that Netanyahu wants to accomplish more and, of course, make sure that Iran will not be able to acquire its nuclear weapon, because their leaders openly declare that they want to use it against Israel. They time and time again threatened to level Tel Aviv to the ground, Haifa to the ground, major Israeli cities. And that is why, when Trump was president, he chose to eliminate Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Quds Force. And I'm not sure if many of you are aware of that, but we have this problem that Iran is basing itself on our northern border, Syria and Lebanon. So what Netanyahu actually led this policy that we will not allow Iranian presence on our borders, and has taken action behind enemy lines, as we say. But of course, the media loves to blame Israel of being the aggressive here and attacking a sovereign country. So I think that Netanyahu wants to accomplish a lot more.
I would say that in foreign policy, there are very, very little differences in Israel between the right and the left, meaning the main issues are Iran, which there is no Israeli party that favors giving Iran, allowing Iran to have the bomb. And all prime ministers, including Lapid, including Bennett, including Netanyahu, and including those before Netanyahu, all of them agree that for Israel reserves for itself the right to use force against Iran. I don't know if it's a possibility, it will happen or not, but all of them say that. All of them opposed the deals with Iran. So in that aspect, there is no policy difference. I would say that the same is the stance against Hezbollah and against the Hamas in Gaza. And the same with the Israeli attempt to receive recognition for Jerusalem as the capital from European countries and so. So I would say that the main difference between the parties in matter of foreign policy is very theoretical, and it regards the Palestinians. So although in theory Netanyahu is supporting the solution of a two-party solution, and the same is true for Lapid. But in fact, neither of them believes that it's practical. And it comes down to a general policy where Netanyahu is more harsh in his treatment of the Palestinian Authority. And let's say that Lapid and the left are a bit more lenient. But I would say that in foreign policy, in all the main issues, the real difference is the attempt to add more Arab countries to the Abraham Accords, the stance toward Iran. There is, if you could say in the past that there was, let's say, the Meretz party that was a bit more on the left on these issues, it didn't even pass the threshold. So now there is actually not one party which is very different on this agenda among all Zionist parties.
And one last question from the gentleman there.
Hello. First of all, Bruchim Habayim. Very happy that you guys came. I have three questions very fast. Number one, regarding Soros, the elephant in the room. We know what we're doing in the United States. We know what has been trying here. What is Israel doing to combat that? Second one, today is election in the US. We're all sitting here, assuming, hopefully, that the Republicans take over the Congress and the Senate. What would be the change that you see in the policy between US and Israel? And the third one is, what are Bibi's plans to make Israel a major supply of gas to Europe?
Wow.
Pretty interesting question.
Yeah.
Simple questions.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll start with the last question regarding gas, which is very interesting that Yair Lapid opposed extracting gas from the sea. And, because he fell into this agenda of the climate change people, that it's going to pollute the ocean. But as soon as Israel started to do this, under the leadership of Netanyahu, they saw the tremendous blessing that it's going to bring to the country, the economy, and serve other countries as well. If I'm not wrong, Germany right now is in talks with Israel to build a pipe that will go all the way from Israel, perhaps through Turkey, to Europe. So, because now with the war, Europe basically understands, Trump was right, that, it's not good to rely on one source of gas, energy, that is Russia. And now they're looking for more alternatives, and Israel serves their interest. As for the Republican Party and Israel, I think that with Israel and America, the relations are very special because it doesn't matter who the president is. The friendship stems from the people. So we saw Joe Biden that was not very friendly towards Israel, although from the Democrat Party, he was very much in favor of Israel. You see the liberal, progressive, the squad, and all of them. So I think that I hope that the Republican Party will win, but I don't think that it's gonna harm. Of course not. But I think that there's only more to grow, and Trump did so much. So I think that is a very important thing. But I do want to say, if I may reveal a secret to you, but we'll keep it between us because there are no cameras here and no lights and everything. Regarding to Netanyahu's policy, I just have to quickly say that he had this amazing policy. The left in Israel was very much on peace, making peace. And when they saw that Netanyahu is actually making peace, they were like, who are we going to vote for now? I mean, he brought 4 peace agreements. That's more than we anticipated. But Netanyahu said, you know what? The Palestinians are giving us a hard time. We'll make them come to us. If Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, would rather fly all the way to New York City and say how much he wants peace, but then refuses to drive 20 minutes to Jerusalem to actually negotiate peace, then that says a lot about him. So Netanyahu's policy, and let's keep it between us, he said, you know what? We're going to, first of all, solve the Arab-Israeli conflict. And because for many years, people believed you, first of all, need to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and only then the Arab conflict. He said, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to solve the Arab conflict, and only then the Palestinians will see that it doesn't benefit them, that the Arab world understands that they're lying and that they don't want peace. I was in Dubai just earlier this year, and I saw that they had this amazing train. And I heard that it cost them $7 billion to build it. And they mentioned to me that over the course of a decade, they donated to the Palestinian Authority approximately $10 billion. Now, I'm asking, where is this amazing train? In Ramallah, in the Palestinian Authority? I don't see a train. Their roads suck. And it only shows you that their leaders are fed from corruption. They keep the money to themselves, buy private jets to themselves. They don't care about the Palestinian people. Netanyahu cares about them. We don't hate, I want you to understand, I don't hate Arabs. I don't hate my neighbors. I love them. When I open the Bible, it says, love your neighbors. I believe in that. But obviously, opposing radicalism, it's something that, if you don't oppose it, you will not exist. So I think that this is a very great policy.
Okay, so first of all, the first question was about Soros, and I don't think that in Israel his influence is very significant. There are, I would say, the main outside influence in Israel is actually organizations funded by the European Union, not by privates. Actually, all kind of civil society organizations, pro-Arab, are funded by various bodies of the European Union. So that is a larger problem than any, let's say, left-wing think tank or Soros, anything like that. So this is one about that question. The second issue about the midterm elections, I would say this. The immediate elections have relatively little effect on Israel because, as was said here, the basic relationship between Israel and America is very strong. And indeed, I believe that today Biden spoke with Netanyahu, and they said we're going to try to add some new countries, new Arab countries, to the Abraham Accords. So I don't know if Biden will succeed, but maybe it will give him some achievement in foreign policy that he doesn't have elsewhere. So who knows? But in general, I would say that the significance of the midterm elections are more to the likelihood of a Republican administration coming in 2 years. Because we know that although both Democrats and Republicans are very pro-Israel, when a Republican administration was in power last, it had a central role in actually bringing the Arab countries to the table with Israel with the Abraham Accords. So this is something that my sensation is that the Republicans are more tending to either it's Trump or other Republicans. But again, I don't think that these midterm elections are going to make that much change. Maybe there was another question, but I don't remember what it was.
The gas, but I think you answered that.
No, about the gas, I wanted to say one thing. I really hope that they don't make the mistake of making it go through Turkish waters, because with Erdogan, you cannot know what happens tomorrow. My own opinion is that we have a long history, and this guy, one day he comes, he gets up on the left side and other guy on the right side, and it plays, and he had a history of being a friend of Israel and then being an enemy and then being a friend, and who knows what tomorrow. So my own position is have this gas go through Cyprus and Greece and not through any Turkish areas, because that would be a problem.
Interesting insight. Well, I would like to thank our dear audience for joining us. I would also like to promote another event for this week, which will happen on Thursday. We'll have a joint event with MCC. I believe it starts at 6:30. And we will have Toby Young from the UK flying in. I think it's going to be a very interesting event. Please join me in thanking our panelists today, Ophir, dear professor who have to leave early. And of course, Hananya, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I think it was a very interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.